Make a motion to call the meeting to order.
I second it.
Thank you. Rich Farley made the motion. Teresa seconded. Thank you very much. Tonight we'll get right to it. As you can see what the agenda is. We're first going to discuss the financial status of the 7 months ending January 31st, 2024. And then the second item on the agenda is the financial review of the budget submission to the city. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Spang and Mr. Weaver.
Well, thank you, Rich. I'm going to let Mike walk you through it. And Mike, if you could mention it, it's kind of new and improved. Working carefully last week, you'll see some changes in how it looks. You'll see when we talk in the narrative about things, we reference the line item that's later in the report, and the report itself has those numbers, as well as a new column for the most recent monthly activity. And then, Mike, I think we did our first stab at the top 10 list as well that came up last month. So why don't you walk folks through and we'll see where we go.
Yeah, sure. It's Mr. Gianelli had some feedback as well. We were able to incorporate in here, so pretty excited to reveal the changes. Ken, if you could just pull up the January report. There we go. So this is just the summary narrative year to date. So ending January 31st, there was a total of 67.2 million expensed of the $150 million budget that we have, and then there was an additional amount encumbered of 82.5 million. So we have right now we're projecting at a positive $285,000 variance. So still positive, but that number is slowly approaching zero as time goes on. The next paragraph you'll see here with the underlining, one of the changes we made to the reports, you'll see below that we added the general ledger account numbers, which is that 1002.00 number you see, as well as the title of what that account actually shows. And in this paragraph, it's just calling out that there are two items really that are kind of being offset. So the teacher regular salary is showing unfavorable, but that's offset because the actual amount that was budgeted for the new positions, we budgeted in an account called enrollment impact staff, and that is typically is below. But for this current report, Mr. Gianelli, you asked that we kind of put them under and over each other. And in a similar manner, there's an account called Tutor Special Ed, which are special education tutors. And the budget for that sits somewhere else. So when you combine those items offset to a favorable $945,000. So what we're trying to do is for those accounts that are either largely positive or largely negative, for the reasons of being offset somewhere else, we're trying to combine and collapse them so it's a little bit easier. You'll often hear me refer to this as just geography, where the expenses are hitting one area, but they're actually budgeted in another. The other item I wanted to call out was the account transfers and special items. This item is the number that we're typically used to seeing all the way down at the bottom of the report. It's a negative $4.7 million number, and that was the anticipated savings that did not materialize. And I think for now, for the purposes of this report anyway, we're going to leave that, so we can expect to see that for the remainder of the fiscal year. And there are some changes we'll see as we walk through the report, but the last thing we just wanted to mention is that in October, at the Board of Education regular meeting, there was a request for $200,000 to be refunded back for the cyber breach and about another 400,000 for the special education mandate. For disabled students that are age 21, it's now going to be age 22. And those were approved for the most in the most recent city council meeting.
So can I stop you there for a moment? The additional monies that were just approved for us, the 600,000, will be a special one-time appropriation that I'm assuming next month, since it was authorized. I don't know how you're going to reflect it, whether you reflect it when you get the cash or when it was authorized. But on the bottom of the $150 million budget, you'll have another line number for those two items showing a one-time appropriation, and that should increase the 284,000 balance by the 600,000. So we'd be looking at some 800,000 positive toward the end of the year. Is that correct?
Yeah, the additional 600,000 will essentially increase, as you're saying correctly, will increase the $150,000 budget. So there will be a favorable variance, because the numbers that you're seeing below the 150 here, which is the 67 million and the 82, those are already have those amounts that were expensed included in them. So there will be an increase in the unencumbered balance, correct?
And one other question, if I may. The costs for the cybersecurity and well, let's take one at a time, the cybersecurity, that money's already been expended, I'm assuming, or incurred on our part. Is that correct?
Correct.
The other 400,000 for special ed, has that been incurred or is it encumbered?
I believe that amount is encumbered. Is that correct, John?
It is. Probably more than half of it has been expended. You know, we're halfway through the school year, and what's not is encumbered either to the out-of-district schools themselves or in transportation to our transportation provider.
Thank you. I can't,
Rich,
yeah, one question. I can't see, okay, I can, but not everybody. So if you have a question, you know, just be polite and just mention your question. I really can't see the hands, but I can see Teresa at this point.
the 600,000, is that coming from the reserves or directly from the city?
I'll answer that. Yes to both. The reserves are on the city balance sheet, and they're releasing those to us.
So this is not the city giving us money. They're granting us the okay to take it out of our reserves. This is not out of the goodness of the city council's heart.
No, it's coming out of your 5 million, whatever that number is, 5 million eight. I don't remember the number, but it's coming out of the Board of Ed reserves.
I think that should be clarified in that in this document.
That it's not that it's what should be clarified, Teresa. It was stated that
The two items were approved by the city at its most from the reserve account.
oh, okay, we could footnote that.
There's
But again,
there's nothing there about being from the reserve account. And I'm thinking it came from the goodness of the city council's heart, and it's not.
no, they're not that kind to you.
I mean, I appreciate them
Mr. Chair.
releasing from the reserves. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
I just like clarification on
Okay.
this document.
Yeah, and that's why I said to show it, when John shows it below the line, it's not in addition to the appropriation, it's just a one-time infusion, similar to what you had some other time before. So, okay,
Mr. Chair.
We can certainly make that footnote so it's clarified. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question? And I see Juanita also has her hand up as well.
Sure, if it's okay, Kate, I'll take you first and then Juanita, okay?
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I just want to confirm, when we made the request of city council for this money, were we asking for it from the reserves, or were we asking for the city for these funds? Because, and perhaps I'm wrong, I knew we had made a request of the reserves, for initially $4.7 million, and then we dropped that down to just over 3 million. I thought these other two costs were requests directly to city council for those funds.
They were different. One was from our reserves and the other we asked for from the city surplus. I forget
And-
which one was which.
Okay. I was under the impression that the 200K and the 400K requests were from city general fund.
Our motion from this committee actually was one was from the reserves.
One, what do you mean, John? The one of either
One
the
that-
400 or the 200?
Yes. I think if we look at my document, I've replicated verbatim what our motion was, and that would tell us what was said. Could dig that out.
And I think that's a good point, Teresa, because it's contrary to my understanding, which meant that it came completely from our reserves, John, and that is the 600,000 reduced the reserve balance.
That's what eventually happened. That's how they put it forward to the city council. That's what the council voted. They
Okay,
didn't vote it the way we
you
asked
submitted
for
it.
both of them.
Okay. Because next year, if all things stayed the same, they'd be obligated to give you the 150 and not the 150 plus the 600,000. If it wasn't appropriation.
You gonna cook tomorrow, Ma?
For the minimum expenditure requirement, Rich?
No,
You're
no,
talking
no, no. I'm just saying, forget what I said. So long as we're clear that it came from our reserves. And Teresa, you're clear on that. So John will footnote it so that we can have that as a footnote.
Rich,
Juanita, yes.
thank you. I disagree that it should be a footnote. I think that it should go right in the paragraph, be very clear and transparent, that this amount was from the approved to be withdrawn from the educational fund, supplemental fund, and this was from whichever other account.
Oh, okay, but all right, that's fine. It's a matter of presentation.
Well, we're talking about making sure that we have a narrative to go along with the budget. So let's be very clear and open and transparent with what we say. And it does not need to be, I don't think it needs to be a footnote. It needs to be very clear where the monies and the amounts came from.
Okay. So in the, unless you want to, well, okay, we take that into account for next month when it's presented on the financial statement. We can incorporate that into the narrative. Points well taken. All right, so let's move on.
Richard Hawley has his hand up.
Okay, Richard,
Hey, good evening, John and Michael. If you could kindly explain, so if I understand correctly, our current salary incumbents all in is running a positive 954K.
Correct.
And you have our year-end encumbrance coming in at about a 284K.
The, just to clarify, sorry, the $945,000 favorable variance is a year-to-date favorable variance that is specific to only two accounts. One is the tuition special education and is offset by the clerical substitutes. The 284,000 refers to the entire balance of the entire general fund.
Okay,
If I
so
could,
kind of with that being said, then where is the variance for the difference of 670K?
You would have to look at all of the different line
That's what I'm
numbers.
asking. That's
Yeah.
what I'm asking for. Where,
Yeah.
where are we struggling as far as against, year-to-date budget in terms of what specific line items, and in particular, the needle movers, whether they be, health benefits, transportation, whatever the case might be.
I would think, Richard, when they get involved in the details of the report, it should become evident. I mean, we're only looking at a summary here, so we haven't even gotten to the detail yet. If you want to move
All right.
on, if you want to move on to the details, we can go through it, and perhaps it'll show up there. It should show up there.
Okay, thank you.
Ken, if you could just scroll down to the next page. So this is the breakdown of the accounts. This is the summary. So the large buckets, so to speak. So salaries, benefits, purchase services, so on and so forth. The first column you'll see is something new to this report. This is month to date actual. And this is the actual spend for the month. So for the month ending January 31st, and actually the top of that report says 2023, it should say 2024. We spent $10,952,000. The next column over, actually the next four columns were what we were traditionally used to seeing, which is the budget, the expenditures year to date of the 67.2 that I mentioned before, and the encumbrance of 82.4, leading to our positive $284,000 variance. And this is, like I said, just a summary. The detail is in the report following this, by account, by line item.
And for the members, I had asked John and Michael to insert a month-to-date column, because I like to use that, and I like to see the month-to-date, because sometimes I like to play with averages and see how they compare to the month-to-date. And what my purpose is collectively is to have a consensus at some point as to how we can improve this report so that we feel we get the information we're looking for from it. So it's open, for discussion at a later point, as suggestions as to other items perhaps that you'd like to see on the year and how you'd like to see it. So this was the first go around, or the first draft showing the month to date. As I said, I'd like to see monthly figures and year to date figures. The other comment I'm going to make is the $4 million. I don't know if you can see what I'm pointing to here, the unassigned minus $4 million. My suggestion would be, in conversation on this, I'd like to see the budget numbers adjusted without that negative number, because to me it distorts the balances, because you have, when you use the word inflated numbers in these categories, and then you're taking it out at the bottom in one lump sum. John had prepared a budget net of these numbers, and I think you read it across and you see the actual balances. Totally should be the same. That is the bottom number, but looking at it line number by line number, there would be differences. So again, that's a topic for conversation to perhaps further clean this up a little bit. If you want to go on, go ahead.
Sure. Ken, if you'll just scroll down the following pages. I believe, Mr. Hawley, this was your request. It was the kind of a top 10 account. So I did the 5 positive and 5 negative. So the top section is those that have the 5 most unfavorable variances, and the 5 beneath that starts with enrollment impact, or the 5 most positive variances. And if there's no questions on that, we could move down to the next page. And then this begins the detail, Mr. Hawley, you asked, although I think it might be hidden by our faces, depending on how you have your screen set up. All the way to the right is the, yeah, there we go, the year-to-date budget balance. So this is by account. The items that have that darkened box around them are the footnotes 3, 1, and 2, which are called out on the summary page. There was some feedback that narrative or summary page that we use should call out the major items in here. So that's just what those boxes are. And this particular page this particular part of the report is about 6 pages long. And Ken, if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that you'll get to that $284,000 positive variance. And the footnotes are below.
Rich,
Yes, Teresa.
I'm concerned at the low balance, and this is only February. I mean, this end of January, that's kind of scary.
To your point, we have no wiggle room, but add to the 284, add the 600,000 or 640, whatever that number is, that we're getting from the city. So it brings the number up to 800,000 at this particular point. I think Dr. Casimiro should make a comment relative to whether she thinks a freeze should be in order at this point. I'll let her answer that.
Yeah, I mean, we started to have some preliminary conversations about a soft freeze just to see where we are to stabilize. The low balance concerns me as well. I'm also cognizant of the fact that we've a lot of the freezing. So a soft freeze would mean our schools would have to freeze some of the supply lines that they have, which were already reduced. So before we send folks into a tizzy, I'd like to continue to work with the finance team to analyze it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The point's well taken, Teresa. Looking at the 284 would be serious because it gives us very little wiggle room for margin for error. The additional 600 plus at least gives us a little bit more of a breathing room. Putting it that way. And I believe that was possibly the I'm not going to speak for John, but when John and Kevin went before the council indicating that they didn't feel that they needed the 600,000, they didn't need the $3 million, but would like to have an authorization to draw down on it. I think they were taking into account the acceptance of the 600,000 that they would get, and thinking the numbers would end up at the end of the year in the black. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, it's exactly right. We gave it a name. We said the $3 million that we had asked for in the summer, we said it's very likely we won't need all of that. Part of that is what Mr. Hawley pointed out in the salary lines. We have a favorable balance there mostly because of our unfilled paraeducator positions. Unfortunately, we still have an estimated 50 unfilled paraeducator positions, and if they're earning $25,000 a year, there's $1.2 million right there. So if you take that off the 3 million, you could say we might need 2 million. But what we asked for is the ability to draw it down as things occurred. And I think the jury's still out on that. They haven't said no to that. They'd like to talk to us some more. So I'm mildly encouraged that that may be the way they do it.
And these reports are so detailed with the amount of line numbers, and I must admit it's confusing. And as we go along, and that's why I think it's important to get your insight and opinion as to what you'd like to see. I mean, this is the first time we put a month-to-date figure. I wouldn't mind seeing another sheet that backs this up with from July through the current period and add to it each month the month-to-date totals, because it then becomes easy to take a look at the transactions, and you can see what particular accounts might be varied this month, or costs were up or down, and explain the reasons when you're looking at that. Right now, it's a matter of, I had conversations with John where I was taking year-to-date actuals and comparing them to the month, coming up with variances. But as John explained, the first 2 months of the year, July and August, are very light. So a lot of my numbers were on the average less than what my actual was. So, you know, there are some idiosyncrasies in the way we operate. And I tend to think the more information we have, the better informed we are. We can always export this to Excel and make it do pretty much what we want to do. But as long as we keep working toward that end, we get to a better understanding of it. I think that's good. And it just gives us a better opportunity to understand the numbers and where we're going. Okay, Mike or John?
Yeah, so that is the last page of this particular part of the report, and then the next page begins the last part, which will show our grants. I did change this report also in that I sorted it by the total budget amount. They were previously listed by their grant number, which is the last 3 digits you'll see after the name. Yeah, that's 004. I just changed it to be sorted by the budget, so you see your biggest grants first.
Yeah, hold on one second. I'm actually at a conference call
All right, that's good.
for the board of ed. Actually, we can't make it up.
One other recommendation I'm going to make is on the other report you have. I'd like to see subtotals after your accounting series, so that your 5100 series, which your salary is the subtotal at, so it would agree with your summary page, and for all the other categories. So then we have nice tie-in numbers, and it's already referenced to see the categories for the summary, and we can drill down and talk about them. I think I gave you a copy, both of you a copy of something that I had developed. Again, we can try that next time.
Sorry, Rich,
Yes.
I'm having a hard time hearing because there's some background noise.
What I was saying is I was recommending that in the future, if you go back to the line number report, Michael.
Scroll up a little bit more, Ken.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these are broken up by the actually the third part. So you'll see these are the 56s. So if I'm understanding you correctly, I'll insert a total so that all the 56s are summed together that match that
Right.
summary page before this, right? I did that for December, so I already have it done. It'll be very easy to make that change.
Yeah, and then I think it makes it clearer, because then you go from the summary, you go to the detail report, and you know, I think we're getting closer to cleaning this up so we understand it. The question is there anything in here at this particular point that you should, I'm going to use the word, put a watch on, something that we should be concerned about? It looks like the health insurance is favorable and running favorable, but is there anything in these list of accounts that you are worried about that could be problematic?
Rich, one of the things on my mind is special education and special education transportation. There's little we can do about those things that come out of IEPs, but we have felt a little pressure in the accounts and in the purchase orders that go out in those two areas. So we're keeping a very close eye on that internally to see what's going on.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody have any other comments on the report? If not, then we can go to the second item on the agenda, which has to do with the budget that we're going to submit. It was my understanding that for tonight, we were going to confirm, since we didn't have last week a final answer as to the capital budget items, put it that way, or the $1.6 million that we added to the budget. We didn't have an answer that night. Dr. Casimiro, were you able to confirm for John with the city whether our capital budget was incorporated somewhere in the city budget? The fact that we couldn't find it may have meant that they put it someplace else, or was it completely left out? We were justified to put in the number for the computers that we needed.
So, and John could confirm, it's my understanding that none of the items below the brick and mortar list made it into for consideration. There appears to be some projects that crossed over, such as the Ellsworth roof replacement and some items such as that. But the items that we placed in the budget that were of the nature of Chromebooks, copiers, security, things that we considered essential, did not make it in for consideration.
So we amended the $178 million to now, to be precise, to be 181,343,000. I think it's 995. Do we have to, at this point, as the finance committee, take that and make that recommendation to the board that is the number and the details that we support and submit to the city, or is it finished for what we did last week? Because I think since we had the confirmation tonight, it sort of buttons it down that the $181 million number is a firm number. We're going to stay with that. So,
Rich, the agenda for tomorrow night, the agenda item, the motion is to adopt the budget at that level.
okay.
Whether that comes from you as a motion or I'm not sure.
But yeah, it's just a recommendation of the finance committee, since we're working on it, that we recommend to the full board to accept the 181 billion. I don't know if that's necessary in a formal motion, or we just move on and do it next night. I'll leave that up to Gladys, and she knows the Robert's Rules of Orders. I work on Richard's Rules of Orders.
Mr. Chair, I see that Teresa has her hand up.
Yeah, Teresa.
Okay, this is probably what I should have asked Mike last week. That figure for the copier and replacement copiers, is that the same figure we've had for the last 2 years trying to replace copiers, and it just keeps getting kicked down the road?
Teresa, just to clarify, you said Mike, you were talking about
Mike Seelig.
Mike Seelig. Okay.
Sorry.
Yes, we've been able to replace a few copiers, but the bulk of that money has just carried on to the next budget.
Even when we had a full allocation last year.
That's correct.
So we're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul again.
As usual. Let me go back to my previous Are you satisfied with that answer, Teresa?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Let me go back to my previous question. Is it necessary, Mrs. Cooper, for us to make a motion from the finance department tonight? We have clarification that the Chromebooks were not in the capital budget, that the finance committee formally recommend to the full committee the acceptance of our number of the 181,343,995.
The recommendation would come from the finance committee to the board on tomorrow night to accept
night?
that number of 181,300 and something and nine something
Okay. All
for
right.
the board to accept that.
Okay, that's fine. So we don't need any motions tonight. Is there anything more that has to be said on the proposed budget? I think we beat that.
Well, I just want to say about, it's come to finally to my attention, and I think, Rich, you pointed it out. We don't have any JV teams at the junior high or sports teams at the junior high level. And I think at some point that should be a serious consideration down the road.
I'm comfortable with the way this meeting has gone. Is there any other information that committee members feel, or any other board members who are on this meeting want to ask? Otherwise, I'll ask.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
Juanita has her hand up.
I want
Thank you. Let me also add in that one of the items that did not get on from the city were the walls at King Street Primary School. I don't know from the past how the Finance Committee has looked at this, but we know that we are living in a time where safety needs to be at the top of our list. And so I'm a little taken aback that we're still sitting with school buildings with an open concept for learning. In other words, no walls, and those are our babies that are in that building. Thank you.
Thank you. Well noted. And I think
Rich,
we could bring that up on a sites and facility meeting the next time. Somebody had a question?
no, Rich, I was just going to add, we're constrained when it comes to capital. We have a lot of leeway within our operating budget and even what we call operating computer student devices and things like that. But the capital and bricks and mortar is really the province of the city council. It's things like that are not an option for us to add into our operating budget as much as we need to. There's a pretty clear line that's drawn in the state statutes. And
Yeah, I just want us to make sure that as a board that we are stressing that should also be of importance to the city. I understand that that's their
Yeah.
thing, but that's certainly that safety area. Danbury has been blessed. I believe that we have not had any serious safety concerns in our buildings, and we want to keep it that way.
Your point's well taken, Juanita, and that's why I said we can bring this up at the sites committee to further push these issues.
Kara has
and-
Kara wants you, Rich.
I'm sorry?
Hey.
Kara?
I just wanted to make a comment about the capital budget projects. You know, I think heading into this and trying to get a handle on what that process entails, you know, that was a little bit elusive to me personally, and I think to a few others. And so, you know, I would recommend, and moving forward, you know, considering that there's a lot of, you know, there's a good list that was put together. There was just on the brick and mortar building side, there was, you know, almost, you know, over $5.5 million for the projects listed, things that we need in the school system. And clearly, you know, adding something like that, you know, is not gonna serve us at this moment in time, but certainly, you know, if we could make an internal, prioritized list based on the list that was submitted and begin to incorporate those in and then build in some advocacy with the city at the same time so that we're present and we're advocating for some of the most pertinent projects before they come to pass in advance, I think would help our position. You know, you know, how we didn't, you know, we get to a place where we don't know if something is even in the budget or not in the budget or on the capital list or not in the capital list is disconcerting. So, you know, moving forward, I'm hoping that we can build in some proactive advocacy along the items that are on here so we can get these picked away, because we do keep kicking the can down the road, you know, with a sense of defeat, as you know, because we know that certain levels of funding are simply not possible. So that would be my recommendation.
Well taken, Dr. Kessler. And I think from my point, in the years I've been on the board, I don't recall us really talking about the capital budget. The big emphasis has always been on the superintendent's budget per se. So I think in our calendar for next year is that we devote the time to prepare the budget and discuss it with as much thoroughness as we do with the operating budget, so that we could, you know, make our statement and do the advocacy during the course of the year to support that. This was a big surprise to me when I joined the board and found out about this budget, and that's why I had asked for a copy of it. I don't recall in the past it being an issue. You know, most of the time we spent has been on the superintendent's budget, so I don't know how that was done in the past. But your point's well taken, and I think, you know, in addition to Juanita's concerns, we will address these issues, you know, as they come up periodically on the sites, facilities, meetings, but we will then look for the agenda next year to do a more prudent job of following through and see what happens with the capital budget. So it doesn't fall by the wayside and become a, you know, 11th hour nightmare like we had to find out this time. It is an embarrassment. I mean, hadn't Michelle brought up that point, we've been going under a misassumption that everything was hunky-dory, and later we found out that nothing was even given credit to what we presented. So, you know, we've got to correct that as well. Okay.
Mr. Hawley, are you able to mute your microphone, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Could I just say something, Mr. Gianelli? And you know, right now we're dealing with the budget, and we're all concerned about everything that goes on concerning education. And as we talk about things that are going on in our schools that we are not happy about, things that could happen to our young people. And I think it's very important that as we talk about, you know, the Sites and Facilities Committee can handle this, the Budget Committee can handle this, who can fix this? I think we all need to advocate for what we believe in. And I think I'm the oldest member on this board. And if I can take time, I advocated to the Common Council last week talking about safety in front of South Street School. And if, you know, if it comes up again this month, I'm going to still go there and talk about safety. You know, they might get tired of hearing me talking about safety and what they can do and what the police can do to make it better. So, you know, I'm just saying this to, you know, and I know we can't be every place at every time. Sometimes we just have to stand up, different people, and speak things, and they'll hear it a little bit different. So I just wanted to say that really quick.
Thank you. Well taken. That being said, then I call for motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, who made a motion?
Terry made the motion. I'll second.
Yes,
Thank you,
yes.
Kate. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Rich?
Aye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. I'll see you all tomorrow.